This is the perfect start to the podcast right here. Look at that dog.
Two
Oh,
seconds.
yeah, go do your thing. I'm just gonna talk for just a second here. So we're back. This is episode 25 of the last week of Epoch podcast. We are gonna go ahead and get started. We've got a couple people who are out today because of their personal things to take care of. We are right next to the holiday season because it is December the 21st today, as I check my calendar. And we are joined by a very special guest who is taking care of his dog in the background. But we have Quietforme, who is here. This is the second podcast that we've had since the beginning of the new patch. The new patch is 084. This is the introduction of all the new druid changes. If you've been playing over the past 2 weeks, then you know that Werebear form is fantastic. We have Swarmblade form, which is like the Bug King, King Bee kind of thing. And we have lots of stuff to talk about. So Quietforme, in case people in chat don't know, we're going to do like a tiny bit of introduction so the people on YouTube, Spotify know what's going on here. But Quiet is a community tester. So he's got just a few pieces of insider information about Last Epoch and about what the patch looks like before it goes live. So, Quiet, welcome. Glad you're here. Thanks,
Hi, guys.
Thanks for showing us your dog. I'm going to put that into the video just so everyone else gets to see the dog as well.
No worry, his name is Ted.
Aw, Ted the doggo. So I like to start off these podcasts, even though we've had you on last week of Epoch previously. I want to know, like, who are you? What's your pitch? And when people see you, what should they expect? What do they expect when they see you on Twitch or Discord or YouTube or whatever?
So, well, first and foremost, everyone knows me for my famous rants. Second of all, I'm exclusively Twitch streamer, but when you come to my channel, expect to only see Spriggan, because it's the only thing I know how to play. Everything else, when I'm on other things, it's more or less just for show, to let them know I am capable of building knowledge outside Spriggan, but really, I just want to play Spriggan. But
Technically
beyond
capable
that,
of playing on it.
yeah, technically capable. And then for CT stuff, like I'm just part of CT, so I'm ahead of the knowledge, but really it's just for QA to help you guys have better patches for when they get to you. Sometimes it's better, sometimes it doesn't seem like we made a difference, but it's all for the improvement of the game. That's my big pitch. I do everything for Last Epoch to ensure 1.0 is better, not better now.
Better in the future, not better now. It's a good pitch.
Yep.
I like that. So we've had another community tester on the podcast recently. We had Lone Star McFluffin telling us all about the program, telling us about like how the developers also have like some kind of program where they like financially support a handful of streamers who've been playing the game for a long time. I think you're also a part of that. I see hashtag sponsored in your stream title.
Yep, I'm also a part of that. It's just more or less a program for EHG to test things out, to maybe when the community gets too big, help the people who've been around a little bit longer, help them push them forward so they're more in the foreground, and help keep the core community alive.
And then before we get into like the 084 specific stuff, this the patch that came out about 2 weeks ago, how did you get started in Last Epoch? What did that look like for you?
Believe it or not, almost 3 years ago now, I was actually a PoE guy. And I saw Zizaran doing a dev interview for these devs for Last Epoch. And I was like, what the hell is this? And it was actually not just an interview, but also QA. So I started asking questions about their game, trying to get a feel for it. And believe it or not, after that QA interview was over, I bought the game and been hooked since.
That's awesome. Yeah, and we've even seen Ziz. He's been doing a little bit of YouTube and a little bit of Twitch content as well, talking about Last Epoch recently. He finished his Gauntlet stuff in Path of Exile, jumped into Last Epoch, started exploring, put on his new squirrel helmet, which is his unique item that he's added to the game, and then instantly started creating them with Rune of Ascendance. So there's some pretty good Twitch clips floating around like that.
Yeah, that was a 2.6% chance of that happening. So that was wild luck.
Technically, it's a 2.6 repeating. So you have a couple rare items that are in the game as well. So we have Twitch chat pulled up on the second monitor. There's some people in chat who are wondering which items are yours. Do you want to talk about your items that are in the game?
So believe it or not, I have the Band-Aid fix item and then the actual cool item. So the Band-Aid fix item to me is the Spriggan Belt. that was before this patch. Even still, this patch was used for just snapshotting mana resource to maintain Spriggan Form and get some reses and a little bit of goodies out of it. But then the legendary system was added in, and now that you can put like regular rare affixes onto it, it's actually like a mid-tier item that before was kind of niche use. Now it's like one of the best actual legendaries you could possibly make, especially because you get double HP plus the cleanse onto it, and then you're just getting all that extra flat armor and resistances for like free essentially. So I made the Legacy of the Quietforme Spriggan Belt. If when you see the word quiet in that item, that's a direct reference to me. Quiet for me, if you couldn't put two and together. And then I also made Ravenous Void, which is a super rare high-end chase item that's not meant to be a build enabler. It's just meant to be there for a build definer. And it's just there, something I created because before the legendary system, all this, there was no reason to play endgame. You got to endgame, you did a power meet, got corruption up, you may get an omnis, and that was basically about it. So I created this specifically, just give me more reason to push things to 100 and stay in endgame longer until they added dungeons and legendaries and completely obsoleted that goal. But we'll talk about that later.
So I don't know if you know about this small interaction, but recently, Ziggy D, who has been a proponent of Last Epoch for a while here, there was a moment a couple days ago where he was playing some Last Epoch and he asked Twitch chat, his people, and he was like, okay, hey, what's the best unique item in the game? And a bunch of people were like, Ravenous Void, Ravenous Void, Ravenous Void. So he pulled up the item and he looked at it and he's like, so it makes you tanky? It's like, yep. That's all it does. It's like, well, what about this time rot stuff? This time rot stuff, it looks like it would be a down, like maybe it hurts you and it makes you. No, it just makes you really tanky. It's a good item though. I'm glad it's in the game.
Yeah,
and it's got vitality. So my favorite class, Void Knight, I get to have some extra scaling in there too.
Believe it or not, Perry, before I was a Druid main, I was a Void Knight main, and it's actually my favorite class and theme in the entire game.
Interesting. All right. So let's go ahead and mention this as well. So we had a race this past weekend. Vision GL hosts these community races every weekend, virtually every weekend. We're taking this weekend off because of the holidays. But this past weekend was the Druid, and in a week and a half, maybe 2 weeks from now, we're gonna have the next one, and that'll be the Void Knight tournament. So I've already started thinking about all the Void Knight builds that I'm gonna be trying to push in the arena with over a 4-day weekend. So I'm looking forward to it.
Nice. Yeah, it's always a good thing. Unfortunately, I only get one tournament in a patch because how it works out is I gotta ask my wife to cover me and do all the chores on the weekend. And typically, I only get one weekend out of the patch where I'm in the doghouse and I get to do that. So unfortunately, I won't be participating in any more tournaments for at least this patch until the wife CD is back on cooldown.
So let's talk about. You really got to phrase it like that. So let's talk about this past weekend. There's a lot of things that we do get to cover, but I want to talk about the build that you were playing. So this past weekend, it was like the Druid tournament. The hardcore and softcore were running at the same time, and you chose to play in hardcore, and you were playing like some kind of Spirit Finger Spriggan build. What was that?
So I was playing Spirit Thorn Frostbite Spriggan. I call it and coined it Winter Wizard. Essentially, you're just converting your poison chance, and it's from all sources, into frostbite chance, and then you get cold damage through the cold conversion in the node. And essentially, how Spirit Thorns work is it has 3 bolts per cast, and it shotguns those bolts. And because of the shotgunning effect, they put less 40% ailment chance on the things. So you got to really up your chance a little bit extra. But if once you get it to like the 300%, you're guaranteed to get 3 stacks per cast. So that plus my 100% cast speed, I was applying the stacks really quick. And then with things like snowdrifts and frostbite shackles, you could just pop right off with dot effects. And then you also have things like damage over time while transform, freeze rate multi. So you can easily reach about 3k freeze rate multi, plus then you got all the damage over time, plus the LE damage over time. And then with Frozen Ire, if you get a 2 LP legendary Frozen Ire and you either get LE damage over time or cast speed onto it, it's just immediately a win-win right there.
Isn't Frozen Ire the one that gives you like necrotic res per level or something?
Yes, and it also gives you freeze rate multi per level, cold spell damage per level. It gives you everything. Then the implicit has more freeze rate multi onto it, and then if you get freeze rate multi plus cast speed onto it to a legendary, that item alone gives you 1250 freeze rate multi just for existing. It's so
Imagine,
good.
imagine telling people 3 weeks ago, like, hey, make sure you keep all of those freeze rate multi exalted items. They're gonna be so good someday.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Abs-
so
wild.
it's strange how just like the addition of one new unique item just changes so much about like the prioritization of these affixes.
Yeah,
Um,
it was just nice that with that pair of Snowdrifts, it actually made a damage over time build arena viable competitively, and I don't think that really could have been said for outside like very specific fringe cases before. So like to me, that was like the biggest thing about it.
is Frostbite good? Or
Yes,
is it just those two unique items that are good? Because Snowdrift,
Frostbite.
the new
Okay,
unique boots are good, and Frostbite shackles are good. But like, is Frostbite good, or is it just like those unique
Frostbite is
items?
inherently good because what it does, it lowers their freeze rate multi defense. So if you get enough stacks onto them, even 300 to 400 waves in, you could still freeze things and just absolutely destroy them. So it actually debuffs the thing you're already stacking, and you can almost get perma CC if you do it well enough with cast speed. It's absolutely wild just in itself. Before I got the boots and before I got the shackles, I was still freezing bosses.
Interesting, interesting. And I've heard there's some hot technology going around that seems to be like something that everyone brings up in Twitch chat whenever I'm lurking somewhere. But freeze rate per stack of chill is apparently a more multiplier along with everything else. And
Yes, it
everyone should
is.
write this down. You should know this right now. Freeze rate per stack of chill.
Yes, and it's even more wild on Spriggan with the Spare Thorns because at 80% pierce, you are applying that to everything you pierce through. So you're also getting the more in an AoE setting. So you're just looking in a direction and blasting mobs.
I feel like I should have played this. I played a cold damage over time bear, and like it's one of my new favorite builds, but like it wasn't that busted.
Oh
I
yeah.
don't know. We'll see.
But to be fair though, at least on Bear you got mobility. I'm just getting shafted on Spriggan. So if I don't have this perma CC blasted in a direction, I'm basically fucked anyway. So it's an all or nothing style build.
For anyone who's on Spotify right now, I have a cat crawling all over me, and I couldn't be happier. This is just great. So, I think the bear rework, man. There's so many things I want to talk about. The bear rework, the fact that you have Maul, which is like this little bunny hop, and you also have Rampage. You have two movement skills, and you've got like good damage over time, and you like clear super fast, and you transform, and it's actually just a lich. The new werebear is actually just like the bear lich project. It's so
I
good. I love playing
I
it.
that's why it's my least favorite because it's so good. It literally
No,
does everything better than every other transformation except poison. And I was actually talking to Anna, one of the HG devs, about this in my stream the other day, and I was like, "So you guys just continued the werebear favoritism into this patch, and just because this thing outshines in almost every case except." This one niche fringe case, and it has mobility and tankiness and all this leech availability to it, while everything else just has hardline fuck yous built into the tree. Because they just hate casters when it comes to the primalist stuff, as you can see with all the non-support we get in the mastery tree. It's all the great class affixes like melee leech and no spell leech and such. So and I was like, it really hurts the case of all of primalist being good when you just have this one thing that does everything, and it really decentivizes the other two transformations. So, yeah, I've always been, team fuck werebear because of that.
so we're getting very close to a conversation that you mentioned to me that you specifically wanted to talk about. So I want to go ahead and start framing that conversation right now. Tell me about patch 084. Tell me about you being a community tester. What did this patch look like over the past few weeks, months? How long have you been able to test this thing?
So I will tell you what I can, but again, NDA, right? So I will frame though, we had this for a little while, and because like obviously we need time, right? That's just a logical guess that most people can make. And how it started out was, to me, hot garbage. I did not like it for the first couple of weeks I got to mess with it.
You didn't
And
like
then
the legendaries. You didn't like the new content, the dungeon, the druid. What did you not
uh
like?
I did not like Druid as a whole, period. And just after 2 weeks a few things clicked because it was such a major change, and it started making sense and I liked it. Um I just want to frame I like everything about legendaries, but one particular thing that I think devalues the whole point of the legendary system. And that is high level uniques that are already inherently rare getting completely shafted on 3 to 4 LPs because they can never actually humanly exist. There is a chance, and they try to say, yes, there's a small astronomical chance. Michael even tell you he likes the idea of one person in a human lifetime maybe having it, but I think by just completely shafting out with the numbers on things like the one everyone knows because the one they actually gave the numbers on is Ravenous Void, unironically, where it's 1.6 times 10 to the power 19th. And my wife, she's a master's in statistics, and with the information and stuff that I know and I gave her, it is not humanly possible for an SSF player in a million league content cycles ever obtain a 4 LP item for Ravenous Void. And even with limited trade and all that, it's not going to be accessible and stuff like that with for those who read the Bazaar post. And the whole point of the legendary system to me is literally taking items and making them better because you already don't need a legendary. You already don't need rares. You don't need exalts. You don't need half the shit in the game already. This is just there for more added fun and more goals to give yourself if you just want to sit and end game content. But for the most part, you could get to 90 on a character with only rares and maybe one unique and have nothing else to do because your character feels complete. The only reason to keep playing is to go for these ridiculous items, and by just making it literally and humanly possible within an actual human lifetime, you're just basically saying to the people who want to invest more time, have fun. And people see it like, well, we have years and stuff like this, but people forget, and this is why I talk about I proved the game for 1.0. We're going to have League and Cycle content. That's going to be the majority of what we do. Most people who play on standard, I'm sorry, but you don't fucking matter. The whole game is going to be based around League and Cycle content. That's what's going to keep people playing. Everything's going to be moved to standard after the fact. That means those items are going to get removed out of the leagues anyways, and you're going to stop playing them for the most part. Because I know I will.
Sounds very similar to like standard and like what role it plays in Path of Exile as well. It's like
Right.
this is the dump where everything goes after the fact.
Exactly.
I want to clarify one thing before we keep going. So you mentioned like the 1.6 times 10 to the 19th. So
Yep.
that is the just for context, that's the chance that a Ravenous Void once dropped has 4 LP on it.
Yes.
So,
So
like
basically,
you need to get the Ravenous Void first, and then you have a
yes,
1 in 1.6 times 10 to the
correct.
19th chance for death
And
4
to
LP.
give And because Mike likes talking about astronomical values and bringing it to context, if you took the world's population of insects, which is 10 quintillion insects on the Earth of the planet that we are
Wait, this planet?
on this planet, only 16 of them would have a 4 LP Ravenous
Wait,
Void.
is that a
And
big deal though? Like,
yes,
why do you
yes.
need a 4 LP Ravenous Void?
Because I want to be the guy with my standard stash having a 4 LP of every unique as a lifetime goal. And I can't do that.
It's a big goal you've got there. Having a
Yes,
1
it
LP
is.
Ravenous Void having a Ravenous Void is really, really good. Having a 1 LP Ravenous Void is insane. It's
But so I
that should be
also
the goal right there. Having a 1 LP Ravenous Void.
yeah. But here's the thing, right? If a hardcore person can't get it, right? A casual is definitely not going to get it. And the thing is, the hardcore person knows that we're never going to attain it. And that's fine. This is really hurting is more the casual audience because when you get into the LP system from a first perspective, on the fresh perspective, you have this problem where this system teaches you can eventually have a 4 LP of this unique if you work at it. But then when you get to the higher LP uniques, and also because they manually adjust each unique to what they think is powerful, to nerf them out of the 4 LPs. When they find out they can't have that, it's going to be a real feels bad, especially if they already dumped so much time into grinding for it. And then this also brings into my other thing, because they can manually adjust unique items into different like rarities of what the LP could have, and there's just certain number values if you're looking at like database or tongue where it can't. Like if it's at a 200, it cannot have LP, period. And Ravenous Void is at a 115. And it's that ridiculous, right? So then you got Wings of Argentis, which is in the same category, but it's a lower level and more obtainable unique. And they try to do it as a balance perspective, but then I made the argument, okay, if you want to do it for a balance, then why Prism Wraps, right? Why Aurora's Time Glass? Why Bastion? Why are these way more obtainable and not in the same category? They're already contradicting themselves within the LP system on how they manually adjust it.
So I do want to. I just need. I got to pause you at some point. So you mentioned that like in Tunk Labs, Tunk Lab website. I think it's like lastepoch.tunklab.com. It's a website that Tunk, a community member, puts together. He has all of the values for like legendary level posted on each unique. So then it's something like a Prism Wrap. Prism Wrap is a very low level item. It's like a level 1 unique chess piece. And we know that unique low level items, it's more common that those are going to drop with 2, 3, or maybe even 4 LP on them. That's why we've seen people walking around with like 4 LP bleeding hearts, for example. So Prism Wraps was artificially adjusted by the developers to have like a super high level. So it's like a level 70, like
I think it's
legendary
90.
level. 90, something like that.
Yeah.
So it's much more rare to get 1 LP on a Prism Wraps than it is to get on something that you would think would be an equivalent like a Bleeding Heart. So I think that was done because Prism Wraps is already like a best in slot chess piece for one of the most powerful builds in the game. Foe's Ellie Nova boy, whatever you want to call that build. It's like, yeah. I mean, they artificially inflated. Is that bad?
Well, so this is what we're really going to get down to in the nitty gritty of it. So, is it bad now? No, because we have all the time until 1.0 to get these items currently, and we're not going to be reset back every few months. Now, let's bring in league cycles into this. We have people where they have a sole goal, a sole purpose for that league, for example. Yeah, do whatever challenges, get the rewards, whatever, but like they want to have this build and they want to get this one particular item, right? Some people are going to be like, I want to Prism Wraps with 3 LP or 4 LP, right? And yes, it's obtainable, more attainable than others, but they're already being worked against by the devs on obtaining that, and then they'll be like, and then they get reset back and they never reach their goal, and they just sit there like, it kind of leaves you with that bad taste in your mouth, like, I wanted to reach this, but I couldn't, and you feel like you failed in a sense because you couldn't reach your personal goals as a player.
Now,
And because
I would say that during the league cycle, like maybe you have a build sitting in standard that you're gearing, like you gear like 1 or 2 items every league cycle. So like maybe you want like this league, I'm gonna do my normal league stuff, but I'm also gonna farm up like a 3 LP or a 4 LP Prism Wraps, and I'm gonna get some really good items on it, and then I'm gonna ship it back into standard, right? So like maybe every league cycle you have like 1 item that gets migrated over. Like it's like I think I'm imagining it as like a much slower burn once we get to the league standard cycle post 1.0.
Yeah, but I also really want to bring something that is a perspective, because I think this is easily looked over, especially within the gaming industry as a whole. We play games as an entertainment value for fun, just to pass time, and everything should be attainable in that regard for fun when you're paying the upfront cost. And just being told for just some arbitrary reason because it makes the devs want to have this in their game because it feels good for them to possibly see this fringe scenario. I feel like it really devalues like the whole point of the game entertainment industry, where you play the games, have fun. Now some make careers out of it, but like that's not the norm. The norm is the everyday person's popping on, play a game, have some fun, and they should realistically be able to obtain their goals within that fun. And having these cases like Ravenous Void and these 4 LPs where someone wants to have fun in obtaining them possibly one day, just never being able to, just really like it could look down at it and be like, well, why should I do this, right? When they could play Diablo 3, for example, and actually obtain things, or play PoE and attain maybe a mirror item, right? It makes them less competitive in that market for other style of games where people can obtain that, right? And I'm not saying you have to make things easily obtainable. That's not what I want. I even gave them the example. I farmed Ashes Alar for every day, 8 years on 15 characters before I finally got it. I would like that kind of level of rarity where it is possible over like 8 to 10 years, not I start at like 4 years old and I live my whole life and I still don't have it and I gotta like legacy account down my shit, right? Like that's just like to me unrealistic standards.
What would you say that you want like I feel like you just said this, but like within 8 to 10 years, any item that you wanted should be attainable.
Right.
Yeah. So maybe just that 1.6 times 10 to the 19th, maybe that number is rubbing you the wrong way.
It
That you
really
should...
is because, like, if you look at it in this regard, a PoE raw drop mirror is a 1 in 26 million. And everyone tells you in PoE, because they've told me this, it'll take 10,000 hours of gameplay before you even have a start to maybe seeing one. How many people are realistically going to play a game for 10,000s of hours? Not many. So it's
I
like,
mean, your average Path of Exile player probably plays for 10,000 hours.
Yeah, but Path of Exile is
okay.
a fringe pace within the gamey genre, like, you know what I mean?
I gotcha. Once you get to action RPGs, you get like these people who really just want to sit there and grind for a while, and maybe 10 or 20 or 30,000 hours. Yeah, maybe I should be able to get a 4 LP Ravenous Void. Yeah,
exactly. Maybe. I'm not saying like they have to like make it like easily attainable or target farmable within like a league cycle. I don't want that. Like when I first created the fucking item, I wanted people to see maybe one every few cycles, right? That's why I made it as rare as it did as a chase, as like because no one needs this stuff, right? So it's like, why not have just a little fun with it, you know? And we don't need legendaries. No one needs legendaries. So like if we're making the argument you don't need this, then okay, make 1 LP as rare. Fuck everybody over. We don't need legendaries. Let's make that argument and take it to that level. It's like I don't like that argument because all it basically is saying you're just defending an astronomical value because you hate fun.
I see Twitch chat on the corner here is saying that the average Path of Exile player doesn't get past Brutus or doesn't get past Act 5. Chat, it's a joke. I apologize for having to point that out. I understand. I know, but when you get to games like action RPGs, the people who sink their time into action RPGs, they play for a long time. That's just the kind of person that sits around and plays these games. You know what I mean? Like someone in Path of Exile, if you like Path of Exile, you're gonna play for a long time. If you like Stardew Valley, you're gonna play for maybe a couple hundred hours, maybe 1,000 hours in Stardew Valley, but like 20,000 hours, nobody's gonna play Stardew Valley for 20,000 hours. Get out of here. But Path of Exile, it's like, oh yeah, I played for 30,000 hours. It's fine. Okay, so you have your feelings about legendaries. It feels like you want the game to be fun, and you play games for fun. And I should be able to get a Ravenous Void someday that has 1 LP on it. Because for me personally, I feel like I will never see a Ravenous Void ever. So I've already given up on that.
Right, and that's the thing. Like that is the problem right there. I gave it multiple sources on a purposeful reason. Okay, like this is like where my thinking's at, right? Like a casual person should have the opportunity to be able to tame something. So I made it so it's an extremely rare chance on basic 100 empowerment corruption, just in any random ass map. But if you want to be hardcore about it, go farm Gaspar, get up to high corruption, get that 3%, and sit there until you get it. You could be hardcore about it too. And I don't see why we can't be the same about the legendary system. Why can't we have the hardcore lock it behind T4 Julera? And I finally got the Ravenous Void, but I still have to fight this ridiculously hard boss. And if we're in hardcore, you're most likely going to die to it and never get the item anyways, and it's already ghostly dead. So it's like, why? Like, we have so many walls of RNG and so many walls of, like, essentially fuck yous. So why not make it possible? Because we already have to go through so much just to even have the chance to make it.
I hear
So
what you're saying.
I'm like, we have like, and it's already pre-balanced if you think about this in regards. We have it. You have to get the item first. You have to land the rolls first, and then you have to go and do a boss first, and then maybe you'll get what you wanted on first. If you get 4 LP, you're gonna get whatever you want, but like that's part of the RNG, right? So it's like we're already going through so many levels of gameplay and chores, so to speak, if you want to call it that, just to have the opportunity. So why not make it more reasonable to do it? Like I would totally go in SSF hardcore and fight a T4 jeweler if I manage to get a 4 LP, even with the highest chance of getting my ass clapped, right? Like it's the whole like I earned it and then I earned it further. Give it to me, right? It's just like it makes no sense. It completely devalues the concept of it. And now just like even bring this devaluation one step further, think of all the people with the creator pack right now who wanted to make maybe a big dick chase item with high rarity and high tiers. Well, now they're completely disincentivized to because of the legendary system, because they know if they make something too good, it'll never be obtainable with a 4 LP. So now things are going to be, in terms of people wanting to make their items in the future, now they have to take this into account and go, I have to make a lower level item with maybe a little bit less stats, so that way I could work around the LP system to make it out fucking game breakingly broken, right? And so
I
like it's
don't
making more work for them.
I don't mind at all what you're saying. Like what if the next item in the game doesn't give 25% damage reduction? I think that's a good thing. Wyatt. Your item's insane.
Yeah, my item's insane because I purposely made it insane. But here's
And
the thing,
you also
right?
made it insane before legendary items were introduced to the game. So like your
Right.
perspective, you gotta like I know you know this, but I gotta remind Twitch chat as well. Your perspective is quite unique. You did this before unique items, or sorry, before legendaries were in the game, and you purposely pushed the envelope as hard as you could to get a super chase item that was virtually best in slot for every build in the game. That's your
Right.
perspective. And like I get your complaints, but I want to shift gears just a little bit. Over this past weekend, this is the first time that we've had one of these community races going on. Everyone's jumping into hardcore and softcore, doing this stuff. Did you make a legendary item over this past weekend in like this 4-day race, or did you see the clips of anybody else doing this?
Yeah, I did actually. I actually made myself a 1 LP snowdress with a tier 6 CA onto it. And because of that, I actually also managed to find a ruby ring with a tier 6 CA. So I got completely, it was able to save points off the attunement CA nodes for Druid and push that further into my health and damage. So I totally did.
And
And that was a good feeling.
how do you feel about like the LP creation process, like in terms of short term goals and hype and Twitch clips and like those YouTube moments that really stand out with high emotional impact on them? Do you feel like
Oh no,
Legendaries
they're
has
great.
succeeded in that?
They definitely succeeded in that regard. I'm not denying they succeeded in that regard. I personally feel like they succeeded in that regard. Like I said, for me, this is very much a 1% fringe case problem I'm having, but I could see it, the long term of it becoming a problem.
I'm picking up what you're putting down. I know it's a 1% issue, but like I know that if I were in your shoes, I would want someone to understand where I'm coming from and like quiet. I get it.
Yeah.
I'm empathetic. You know, I'm with you. I get it.
Yeah.
But like, am I sympathetic? Like, do you really need a 4 LP? Okay. So here's my next question for you. Speaking speaking of the community testing that's been going on, the stuff that you have access to before the rest of us have access to it. How were dungeons? Were dungeons the same the entire time? Did anything change around? Yeah, tell me about that.
No. How do I put this without breaking NDA?
Uh-oh.
Basically, the dungeons that we have now wouldn't exist if the community testers didn't gang up on EHG.
Go on.
It wasn't an endgame system before. I'll just say that. That's all I'm gonna say. Yeah, it was bad. It was really, really bad before.
Well, thank you so much for all the hard work that you've been putting in to make the game better for me. I don't know what exactly you did, but apparently it's very impactful.
Yeah, like I will say this CT patch EHE worked harder than they ever worked before because we were running them ragged right up to like the night before patch actually launched.
How much feedback did the community testers really give? Is it just like smoothing out the edges to make sure that things are like as few bugs as possible, or like how many like substantial changes are you making to the game as a community tester?
Many substantial changes. Like just like give you like a roundabout number, like we probably made like easily over 50 to 100 forum posts.
Holy moly, that's okay. Can you?
Yes.
I guess I want more context for this too. Can you give me an example of something from like a while ago, like 6 months to a year ago or something, that like the community testers really started to influence? What's a big change that we owe to community testers? I need more context. I need a good story.
Uh fuck. That's hard because like anything substantial is NDA breaking, like just straight up. So like answering that question will just straight up break contract. But like like as a thing that was substantial, it would be dungeons. In fact, like
Okay.
it give you a little more context. The rewards that exist now didn't exist before.
The rewards that exist now didn't exist before.
Correct.
Okay. Well, if you had anything to do with monsters dropping more exalted items or monsters dropping substantially more exalted helmets, if that had anything to do with community testers, and you can neither confirm nor deny, I understand. But if that was you, I'm on board. Because going into a dungeon and fighting some relatively scary monsters at tier 4, even before you get to the boss, is a great way of just getting a bunch of exalted rings or helmets or just garbage so that you can try to make more legendaries. I've really been appreciating that change just to get more exalted stuff.
Yeah, that's definitely the best part of it. Like it really does help make endgame and have an alternative source other than mindlessly running maps in Monolith. I
So
totally agree on that front.
so monoliths don't give us any source of exalted belts, and they don't give us exalted boots or exalted gloves. When do we get exalted belt nodes on the monoliths so that I can actually make my 2 LP Legacy of the Quiet Forest that I dropped?
So here's the thing, right? There's not a lot of CT, right? Like there's only so much like people can cover and give back and feedback. And this is like something I talk about on my stream every bloody day. And this is like one of the things I back EHG on. I'm like, if you have a complaint, instead of bitching at me, why don't you go make a forum post because they read that shit? Like that's how most of the changes in the games actually get changed. It's through big forum posts with lots of topics and people commenting on it that get more into the priority system. So the bigger the fuss, the more likely it's going to get changed sooner rather than later. But that being said, the sooner the change might fix the problem now, but as things get implemented in the future, it might create more problems, and so it might be better waiting. So keep that in regard. But all feedback is important. The general population is more important than CT in terms of feedback because it's all about making as many people happy as possible. The only reason why CT exists is for the group of people that they know have a great mindset and they agree on how they approach feedback to just be more critical and have a place where they can have the information more readily accessible. So EHE has an easier way of finding that concrete, harder perspective from people. And the CT group is not just tryhards, like it has a wide variety of people in it. So it's like how you guys approach your feedback is just as important how we do it.
How many community testers are there? Is this like 5, 10, 50 people? I don't think I actually know this information.
I actually don't know how many people, but like you could pretty much guess, right? Because like there's quite a few that are just known CT testers. So if we take the current number of known, where they just publicly said I'm CT or the stuff on the forum, we could probably say that around about 15 people.
About 15? Okay. So 15 people are going to have access to multiplayer in Q1 of 2022. And you get to make as many changes as you want or recommendations on the forums before we get access to it in, when was that again? When's patch 0.9 coming out?
I have no idea. They haven't set a date.
If you know what, listen, I would like to go on the record. I'm willing to bet all of my channel points saying that Q4 2022. I will be the optimistic person. I'll take one for the team. I think Q4 2022 would be a great time for patch 0.9 to come out, assuming that.
So
right.
if I had to make a guess, because I truly don't know, like if we go off what the post said with a Q1 CT gets to test multiplayer, and given what I know, it's probably going to be later Q1. So, and then after that, because multiplayer is the hardest thing that will make or break them and destroy them, and on PR front, I can believe like minimum probably 6 months of work before it even gets tested to the public. If I had to make a roundabout guess, so I could see fall, winter of next year, but I don't see anything earlier than that personally.
Interesting. Chat, write that down. Write that down. Write that down. All right, so let's keep talking about the 084 patch. There's a number of changes here. So it's actually funny. The first time that I ever met you, Quiet, I was hanging out in your Twitch channel, and you were talking to me all about how awesome it is to look like Groot in like a 2D character model in a 3D like video game. And I couldn't imagine anyone actually having fun doing this kind of thing. How have your builds changed with Spriggan? What like was Spriggan a success? Like, are you enjoying the new stuff? Are vines still good? Is arena still like what are you doing with Spriggan these days?
Okay, so I will start this with Spriggan and Druid as the best it's ever been currently. Now, it's not without its problems. It definitely has its problems. But right now, I could honestly say from how I was playing before and how I'm playing now, and just because of people and how they're going to act, Vines is still really, really good. It's just now it takes a little bit more thought in your gameplay. I actually had, if it's okay, shill a little bit here, but I actually had my Vines guide covered by Rhymed. That's how good it was. So, and it was pushing 300 plus corruption. It was chill as hell. So, and so in that regard, the Caps Divine was obviously like it was a nerf, right? There's no matter saying about it. I was pushing 100 plus vines before. Like, there's nothing you could say in the human world that says going from 100 plus to 12 is not a cap.
Having not 100 of a minion is okay. That is an appropriate nerf to introduce to any video game. That's
yes, and I agreed with the nerf. I actually was the one that was like, yo, you gotta nerf this shit, right? So but they left it in a really good place despite the capping, unlike Necro. And now before, caster was like it existed kinda. Like, I had a nuke Veil Blast build before that 3-tapped every boss in the game. But playing it was so bad because I had 0 AoE. You had to click on every individual enemy to kill it. So Spirit Thorns is just a better version of that now.
You're just describing. I'm having like flashbacks of every time that I've played a minion build, and like I don't like minion builds. And you're telling me about like you got to click on every single enemy and you got to micromanage this. I'm glad you enjoyed those builds, Quiet, because I'm just not the one who's going to recommend those to a new player.
Can I be honest? I didn't recommend my Veil Nuke Blast before. I didn't. I'll be the first one to say it. Like, the Vines before, yeah, I'd recommend it because it didn't feel like a minion build, right? It felt more like a totem build. Like, Vines now, even though it's a minion, it feels like a totem build, right? You drop something, it sit there and does its effect. But Spirit Thorns now is actually a real caster build, and Thorn Shield is a really good caster build, and totems are still totems, right? So, like, it's just there's more diversity, there's more ways to build, and now it's actually, unlike before, it's now a true hybrid caster summoner in my head.
So, have you done anything with the new Swarmblade stuff yet?
On live, no.
Have you done anything with Swarmblade form not on live?
Yeah.
Anything you can tell us about?
I mean,
did it go well? Did you like it? Is that the current state of it? Did it get changed?
The current state of the Swarmblade I like a lot. I actually really like the Serpent Strike build that I did. The poison damage stacking on it is absolutely wild, but I do wish they gave it more AoE on Armblade Strike because it suffered the Veil Blast problem, right? It's fantastic, but the AoE something to be desired, and that could just really help when you just want to be a melee boy. But like the thing that really upsetted me about Stormblade was if you looked at the Stormblade reveal guide, they preface it as a melee skill first, not a minion skill first. And the problem is it's 90% minion first and 10% melee, and it feels like they kind of hit the mark off that. It's definitely it did not meet the expectations that they set out for it in that regard. But it doesn't mean it's bad in any way. It still has a lot of cool builds. It's really good. And it's not what people expected in gameplay. And I think that was what really hurt it.
Is there something from Druid? Like let's talk about just like the three transformations there. Is there something from Druid that you think should be buffed and like doesn't quite meet what it needs to meet, doesn't quite meet the expectation?
Yes. I think every I do think every base transformation in terms of like if you just want a single form, it's missing this one major quality of life feature that would just make it feel good. And
Which
what
form you say?
and any
Okay.
transformation, like there's each one has an individual base form problem. And what they ended up doing, instead of just giving it the quality of life and what it needed baseline to make it feel good individually first, they use the argument, well, just multiform and it fixes that problem. And it's like, that's not the point I'm trying to make here. I should be able to single form without having these issues. And making like and just saying play differently is not the answer in my eyes for some of these problems. And that's like one of the biggest things I dislike about Druid is just if you want a single form, you feel it. Werebear without the scummy vines generation has rage problems in a lot of cases. Spriggan will always have a mobility issue because when you get to high corruption, you're just going to get pushed around and body blocked because you can't immediately blow things up. Swarmblade doesn't meet the expectation. It does everything kind of well, but if you're going to do it well, you're mainly doing a minion build, and that's not what people are playing Swarmblade for. They want to zip around on bug and melee crap like they're a rogue, but instead has a bug, and it doesn't do that. And I think that should have been tweaked before it got released to you guys, and the fact it didn't, I think that's what really did hurt Druid in the long run.
So Bear, we have Rage on Kill and we can have Rage on Crit as well. And I made it to
Right.
level 95 before I opted into the Vine stuff on my most recent Bear character. I thought my raid was perfectly acceptable. Your complaint. Well, go ahead.
So this is when the rage problem. It's not in regards in terms of like the actual skill generation. It's in terms of enemy design. There's a lot of enemies that don't count as a rare or a boss, so you
Oh,
don't
that's
get
a
the
great.
rage on hit.
Yep. I'm with you.
So, for example, spires, you're just gonna run out of rage
Because they don't count as a rare unique monster. Yeah,
Right.
but like that's a bug fix, right? Like just make spires so that when you swipe them, you gain rage if you have the appropriate node. But yeah, that's the kind of a goofy oversight. I see where you're coming from.
Yeah. And that I felt should have been addressed sooner than it did, and it still hasn't been addressed, right? So,
Well, so
uh,
somebody on in chat just needs to go make a bug report about this for me because I'm lazy, and then we'll go fix it. It's fine. Okay. I want to ask you the flip side of this question as well. So I asked you, like, is there anything that you think should be buffed? For the current, just the druid stuff is what we're talking about right now. Is there something that you think is like too strong or should be nerfed? I don't want to talk about
EQ
snapshotting.
Werebear.
Well,
EQ Werebear. I don't even want to talk about this. It's not an argument, it's just a fact. It needs to just be addressed. It's as powerful as EQ Werebear was first initiated into the game as before, and because that mere existence of EQ Werebear, it makes the problem of people just wanting to run mall builds not have good mall builds because EQ Werebear exists.
now are you saying this because snapshotting is also an issue? Because I want to leave snapshotting out of this conversation. It's busted.
I want to leave it out of the conversation
Okay,
too
good,
because
good.
it's
So
been an
you
issue
think
forever.
EQ Werebear is busted even without any kind of snapshotting?
Correct.
All right, tell me more.
So, just because of the sheer design of the LP system with legendaries and getting base grade on Baldur's Wrath, and with how you could scale into the stats for EQ, and the fact it's still a node with more multiplier nodes in that skill than any other skill in the game, and it gains so much more off it just through initial scaling. Even on a 5-second CD, it does not matter when you're just one tapping entire screens, and it's creating this PoE like gameplay, which I think LE should not fall into. And because this build exists, it creates a wrong expectation within the community and a wrong pacing for the game. And so what happens is when someone actually goes to something like Maul, which is actually more in line to what I think the game pacing should be, even though it's a little weaker than where I think it should be, it just makes that feel so much worse, and it creates a bigger gap between skill design because the player now wants to do something different, and it just feels bad because of the already prefaced expectation of EQ Bear. So I think EQ Werebear really needs to be adjusted just for that simple fact it creates the wrong expectation that the game is trying to offer.
Do you like the change that was added onto Baldur's Wrath? Adding the 5-second cooldown that can't be changed with cooldown recovery speed. Do you think that was like a good change? Was that a band-aid change?
So I think it was a band-aid change personally. Like it was still good because it did nerf it originally, but the problem is as players we find ways around these limitations. And if it's just a time-gated limitations, well, you know what we're going to do. We're just going to wait out the 5 seconds and just pull up the whole screen again because we could just put everything into a group and make it a little bit easier in that time frame. So I think, and with the LP system, it also offsetted that change because we're able to get more stats onto the item, making that when you do get it off that 5 second, that much more potent. And so it just completely alleviated what the nerf was supposed to do. And so I think it needs to be relooked at and changed further. Maybe not so much on the item, but maybe look at why EQ scales so damn hard to begin with, and maybe adjust some of the more multipliers within the skill tree to bring it back down.
It feels like there's almost no wrong way to build EQ because the skill tree really does have so many more multipliers in
Right.
it.
It really
Maybe more
does.
than anything else. It's a ton.
Yeah, it's an absolute problem, and I think EQ is like the perfect example of old EHG mentality versus new EHG mentality because you can see how they're designing skills now, and you can see like something like Earthquake how the game used to be, and there's a huge fundamental shift that's changing within the game design that where we're taking more nodes out of skills and giving more interesting interactions and gaining itemization power to make those nodes work better. And so when we have these old school skills that have yet to be updated, like EQ, then you have this itemization power gap gain with the legendary systems. It creates a really bad expectation because the game has not, as a whole, baseline caught up to the new mentality.
Interesting. I like it. I like it. We know that there are a couple of reworks coming up soon as well. I think maybe someone can correct me. I think maybe Paladin is one of the next things to be reworked as well. Um,
I don't know because Paladin with the Void Knight got reworked at the same time as Void Knight, so
I'm
I don't
still
know about
looking
that.
forward to Sork being reworked. Just thinking about like skill trees and skills and whatnot. We have one skill that's just like relatively new and fantastic, and that's Static Orb, right? So even with a nerf to like the Orbit Static Orb, like there's still 3, 4, maybe 5 other ways of playing Static Orb that are awesome, that are like really fun, impactful, very strong too. Some of the strongest in the game. But like maybe there's a couple of changes with the Orbit Static Orb that kind of rub me the wrong way, but we can talk about this later if we
I
need to.
agree. I know. I agree.
Just
Like
like
I
just like
didn't like it either.
um but yeah, the rest of Sork, and the more that I talk about this, the more that it becomes clear to me is like, the skill tree for Sork itself is really boring. Like you follow it along, like here's the cold damage, here's the fire damage, here's the lightning damage, and never the twain shall meet. Like all your builds kind of look the same when you're building them as a sorcerer.
Yeah, they definitely do, and that's just like I said, that just goes back to what I was saying before. That's old mentality versus new mentality, because like Spellblade got a rework like last year, and initially the changes were like what we thought were bad, but then we found ways around what made it bad, and now it seems like you can build Spellblade many different ways within a tree, and it's just good, right? And so I really think it's just a lot of the game is still old, and we're getting things that are new, and the old stuff feels much worse because we're getting all this new shiny stuff that just feels so much better.
It reminds me of one of the things that came out in dev notes recently. They were saying that one of the toughest things that EHG, the developers, are going through right now is they've decided to, make and maintain a single player offline game at the same time that they're trying to deliver on their, Kickstarter goal or whatever it was of making the multiplayer game as well. So having both those projects go on at the same time has been like very difficult for them. So,
Yeah,
EHG gets to look at Path of Exile, they get to look at Grim Dawn, they get to look at these other games that have had successful releases and some of these games that have not had as successful releases, and they get to take notes from them. But at the same time, the game that's going to come out in 5 or 10 years from now, those game developers, they're, maybe they're students in college, maybe they're high schoolers, maybe they're, grown adults who are just working in the industry, but they're also watching EHG and they're watching Last Epoch, and they're taking notes and they're saying to themselves, maybe we should not, try to maintain a single player game at the same time that we're going to work on a multiplayer game, because that really seems to be a pain point for EHG.
Yeah, it really is a pain point, especially because like you can tell they need people. Like they on their website, they have hiring listings for almost every single thing, and one of the biggest ones is a QA manager. Like imagine needing more QA managers for your QA team, right? Like, and then you're doing split projecting while trying to like also have another team work on multiplayer just to get the server technical side up. It's definitely like a small group. It is definitely a big problem, and this is why I've been talking about it for a while, especially on my stream. I've said, and people tend to disagree with me on this, but I think if EHG wants to do things more timely, I think this would be the better approach at this point. Get like all the teams together and just do this. Single player game doesn't matter right now because we're gonna have to rebalance everything for multiplayer anyways, because we're gonna have party groups and all that and all the possible interactions with party play. So why not just get the classes on a baseline concept, right? Get the masteries in, get what you liked about the masteries, just get the stuff in, right? And then after you sort out the interactions and make sure that the stuff works as intended, then because I feel like we have enough content now where we can just be okay for the next year, just have everybody start prepping for multiplayer. Get as many people onto the technical side, server side, get as much of the team as you can, testing out and stress testing your technical server side, and pull more into CT so you could get that tested, and just let single player be for a while, because what's going to end up happening is you're going to get all this multiplayer stuff, you're going to get it all balanced, you're going to get it all worked in, and then it's going to go down into single player anyways. So why not just focus on multiplayer, get the game where you want it to be, and then just patch it in for the single player experience, because it's still going to be fine because SSF is the thing. So I don't see the problem with just leaving single player alone for a while now and just focus on the Kickstarter backing goals and just do the multiplayer right.
Just let Perry, let everyone else complain for 6 months. It'll be okay. Like we're gonna complain about, I want my content, but you think that like just ripping the band-aid off, abandon this current single player stuff, and then just put as much effort into the multiplayer as possible.
Yeah, because let's be real, we're all waiting for multiplayer anyways, and what's slowing it down is us complaining about single player. So just let us complain
Well,
like babies we do, and just work towards
so
multiplayer
so
quicker.
to be fair, I love complaining. So I just this change sounds great. I am all about it. So I think that about puts us at the top of the hour. So again, Quiet, thank you so much for joining us here. I know that we are 2 hosts short. There are a couple personal things that are coming up in the background. We're closing in on the holidays as well. But that doesn't mean that the podcast is going to slow down at all. So next week, Tuesday, we'll have a podcast. Coming into January, our first January podcast is going to be a review of where Last Epoch has been in the past and where it is right now, kind of state of the game update for our first January podcast. So, Quiet, I hope that you will be in Twitch chat when we get there, because we'll have a special guest on at that point as well. Hopefully, both of our hosts will be done with their personal issues as well, and they can join us back on this podcast here.
Well, if not, I would gladly be a co-host for that.
I'll write that down. I'll write it down. So, for everyone here at Last Week of Epoch, whether we're here in spirit or whether we're here in person, I appreciate you being here, Quiet and chat. We'll see you next time. Thanks for being here.